over time, it led me to question everything I thought about happiness. And the book just comes from that journey of me trying to understand why a life that looks good on the outside does not feel as good on the inside sometimes. And one of the biggest turning points of my life was where my body literally forced me to stop. I was constantly running in a rat race, trying to achieve things, do things, ignoring myself. I want people to realize they're not broken if they feel disconnected, because I know I felt like that at times, that I'm not normal, I'm broken. Maybe they've just been chasing the wrong version of happiness or someone else's version of happiness, and they really don't need permission to create their own.
Stories and Stanza is a podcast exploring creativity, resilience, and the transformative power of human stories. Through our two series, Between the Lines with creators and Fail With Me focusing on wellness and life's challenges, we bring you authentic conversations with inspiring voices from around the world. If you are drawn to meaningful dialogue that both comforts and challenges, follow us on YouTube or any podcast platform. Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of Stories and Stanza, where we are joined by our guest Charu Moorjani today. Hi Charu, welcome to Stories and Stanza.
Hi, Oprah. Thanks for having me.
I look forward to hearing about your journey, your book, and what it means for the readers. And we would love to understand the story behind what made the book. In Stories and Stanza, I run two different segments. One is called Between the Lines, where I speak to writers about their craft, motivation, and discipline. And in the other segment, which is called Fail With Me, I explore well-being, mental health, emotional intelligence, resilience, and personal growth based on what the guest wants to talk about. Charu, to get started, of course, we will talk about your book. But before we get to it, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
My name is Charu. I'm the author of the Happiness Pathway book. I'm also a mindset coach, and I work in corporate tech and transformation space where I'm leading large business transformation programs. So a lot of my work, both personally and professionally, centers around growth, resilience, and helping people navigate change. So the book is called The Happiness Pathway. And in terms of the core messaging, it basically talks about redefining happiness and what it means for you. So for a long time, I thought happiness was something you achieved, like the right job, perfect relationship, success and milestones, everything right on paper, basically. I remember sitting on my graduation day and surrounded by everyone celebrating around me, and I felt like I was an actor in my whole own life. And everything was perfect, everything was right, but something just did not feel right inside. And that moment just stayed with me. Over time, it led me to question everything I thought about happiness. And the book just comes from that journey of me trying to understand why a life that looks good on the outside does not feel as good on the inside sometimes. So, moving from chasing external versions of happiness to slowly learning how to build something that feels real, sustainable, and aligned from within you. I
That,
share a lot of my life stories in the book as well. So I share some personal stories from my life, followed by some reflections on what tools and habits that have helped me in my journey. And that is followed by some practical exercises for readers to start their own mindset journey within the book.
you've done a fantastic job in picking up the topic in the first place, that redefining happiness, and that happiness is not something we are searching for outside, it comes from within.
Yeah.
And that awareness, that messaging is very important for us to understand in today's day and age. And as I was telling you earlier, that I try to run two segments basically. One is, of course, we are trying to understand what made the book,
Yeah.
and then also the psychological journey, the pathway behind it. So, Interestingly, in the Fail With Me segment, I try to question what we are labeling as failure. And you said something that strikes a chord with me, that what are we labeling as happiness or what are we searching for? So in Fail With Me, I try to question failure, as in when I'm saying question, I am talking about the stigma, the guilt or shame or anything that's a
Yeah,
result of all the conditioning. And
yeah.
then with the guest, I try to unpack that what is it that we could possibly do differently. And to me, that speaks very deeply with the concept behind your book. And the first thing I wanted to hear from you is, how does that idea of questioning failures sit with you?
I think a lot of us are living our lives that looks good on the outside, but it doesn't really feel good on the inside. And we're following a script given to us by society, family, or culture without even questioning if it's actually right for us. And I feel that creates quite a disconnect from within sometimes. This book really is for anyone who feels like they're living a very good life, but something feels off inside, and then starting to question that, and from there take things in terms of what aligns with me in my life, what doesn't align with me, start questioning everything and try and work through something where you can find things that are aligned with you, that make you feel like yourself, and I think that gives you a pathway of where to go in.
Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned that this book became possible through a lot of your personal stories, and then there are exercises for anyone who wants to follow that. Is there a personal story you'd like to share with the audience today? What made the book possible?
Yeah, sure. So I started this book with a lot of journaling. So I do a lot of journaling just to make sense of my own life, especially during, hardest period of your life. It helps you bring your feelings out. And one of the biggest turning points of my life was where my body literally forced me to stop. I was constantly running in a rat race, trying to achieve things, do things, ignoring myself. And I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome during my honeymoon in Macau. And I ended up in ICU with a mechanical ventilator for a month in there in the hospital. And for the first time, everything felt quiet. There were no expectations, there were no running around, there was no performance to pretend to be someone else. And that's when I realized how disconnected I had been with myself. And that caused me to start looking within to see and understand who I really was and what I really wanted in life and what happiness actually means for me.
And do you think that it's a quest that you found an answer to, or it goes on? Like, does that definition change as you go along?
I think it's very unique to everyone. And it's not a destination, it's not something you achieve after a milestone or an achievement. I've learned that it's actually something you create every day in your life by your habits, by the choices you make. It's about being in alignment with yourself. It's about feeling like your life is truly yours and not something you're performing because of others or what you've been taught in life.
And you said that a lot of this preparation came from journaling.
Yeah,
And one of the most popular episode on this podcast is where we talk about shadow journaling, which is
yeah.
like doing the shadow work through journaling. So if we kind of look back and think about what made you the writer you are today, would you like to share anything about that? Like how you started writing, how it kind of got into the habit of journaling, and then how it got kind of deeper so that it became a book.
I think the story I just shared about me being sick and trying to figure things out, that was, I think, the initial time when I had really started journaling. Post that, I did go through a very emotionally abusive marriage and eventually ended up getting a divorce. So, going through that difficult process of trying to unlearn things that I had learned and trying to identify who I was after I got through that divorce phase got me into journaling a bit more. So that's when I started writing down how I'm feeling because I felt when you go through something like that, you feel a lot of guilt, shame, you feel the judgment of a lot of people around you. So you're not really comfortable sharing your feelings with a lot of people. And journaling became my source of support, where every night I used to journal what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling, or even just documenting my confusion in life. And that eventually became a very, very important habit that I've taken into life, which formed the book as well.
And I admire that strength and honesty that it takes for anyone to journal, because a lot of times we may journal at a very superficial level, but the moment we kind of start getting deeper, and you mentioned that you had a feeling and you wrote it, that what this is what you're feeling, but why you're feeling that. Is there something you would like to share on how to journal in a effective way that we can maintain our well-being through it? I just would love to hear your thought.
I have a lot of journal prompts in my book, so every chapter follows a journal prompt on that topic. But I think the biggest thing is, and the easiest way is to start asking yourself just one honest question. How am I feeling right now? Or how am I feeling about this situation? Whatever you want to journal about. And we don't really need to change our entire life. It's just spending 5 minutes just sitting with yourselves, just sitting with your feelings honestly, and just noticing what we're feeling inside and bringing that awareness in yourself and then putting that down on paper. Sometimes you can't really accept it until you start writing it and you put it on paper. And I think awareness is something that comes out of starting this process just by simple step. What are you feeling? Just ask yourself that question and document that.
On that note, I would request if you could share something from your book with us. It can be anything of your choice. The reason why I ask it to my guests is, of course, we are talking about the story behind the book. And when someone holds a book in hand, they can possibly see the book blurb. But the book blurb alone doesn't do justice to the promise and depth of the book. And I am a hobbyist writer myself, and to me, I feel that the creative words or the written words come to writers in a very specific tone, in a very specific voice, and only the writers can do justice to it. So, if you would like to share something with us, that would be amazing.
Sure. So just in terms of my book, I write about different phases of life. So I write about passion, work, health, self-love. And there is this chapter about embracing change and transformation, where I have penned a letter for the readers who are trying to embrace change or opening space for embracing their own transformation. So I'm just going to read that for you, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Dear you, there will come a day when you realize you are holding on to something, maybe a relationship, an old friendship, a career, or a version of yourself that no longer serves you. And fear will whisper all the reasons you should stay. But here's the reality: letting go isn't the end of your book. It's time to let go of what no longer serves you, to move towards dreams postponed and potential unexplored, even when fear tugs at your heartstring. Trust that releasing create space for new beginnings. I want you to know you are allowed to pivot, to restart, to leave and reinvent. You are allowed to be both terrified and brave. You are allowed to choose yourself. With love, someone who has already been where you are.
Going back to the preparation behind the book, so you mentioned that it was written as journals and then you created the prompts. Right? Is it okay for you to talk about some of the prompts listeners today?
So I'll give you a bit of background about myself. So when I went on a healing journey for myself, I wanted to study tools and techniques that have helped me. So I did study mindset coaching and became a mindset coach, but it was basically to start coaching myself. And I tried a lot of different techniques and a lot of different tools, and some of them resonated with me, like journaling and a lot of things like value maps, joy mapping, and things like that. I would say the biggest thing that I swear by and I always do is gratitude. So every night before I go to bed, write three things that brought you joy. And over time, you will have so many things that bring you joy. But when you have this attitude where you are thankful for that joy in your life, you attract more. You attract more abundance, you attract more joy, you attract more better things in life. So that is one practice that I would say everyone should do. It's a very simple practice, right? Three things you are thankful for that brought you joy. And that's the easiest way of changing your mindset. And it's not forced positivity. You could be in a very difficult situation in life. You could be going through something very hard. It's basically saying that, yes, life is hard, but there are also good things there. And you choose to notice those good things first.
And since we are talking about healing journey and awareness and gratitude, I wanted to hear from you. Now, if we look at healing journey, it probably works very differently to different people. And in this podcast, for example, I have spoken with a range of guests. So, for example, I've spoken with someone who was in hospital and her body is paralyzed, but she could speak. She wanted to be my guest. And I've
Mhm.
spoken with people who went to commit suicide and then they came back. I've spoken with people who has gotten into addiction and then came back from there. So there are all these amazing stories that I hear from people. You mentioned your story that how you went into ICU when you were there for a long time before you recovered. Now, when you talk about journaling and healing journey and being mindful that healing journey would be different for different people, a lot of times we struggle to express what we are really going through. You can give people a prompt, but then that self acceptance, that authenticity, breaking free of that conditioning, that becomes the hard part of doing it. When it is very good, it is a fantastic exercise, and I'm really sort of, I see the power of journaling. But to someone who is struggling to communicate, struggling to accept their pain, struggling to communicate, to tell their story, or at least what they're going through, can be difficult. And then they fall into the same cycle over and over again, like
Yeah.
not able to break free and get the joy of doing it. Like the moment you embrace it, I think the joy begins there. So, to someone who is repeating the cycle again and again and
Yeah.
not able to break free, is there anything you would like to share with us? What is it that you would like to share with someone who is struggling to communicate, to tell their story?
I think if you struggle with journaling, there are multiple ways to connect with yourself. So start small, start just by slowing down, just by being present where you are, just taking 3 breaths to be present in the moment you are, trying to stop living life in auto mode. And the best way of bringing awareness sometimes is speaking to yourself. So I'll give you an example. Say you're doing a mundane task in the morning, making a cup of coffee, but you always do it on autopilot. You're not present. You just quickly you know what to do, you know the actions. But what if you brought your attention to the present moment? When you take out the cup, you say, I'm opening the cupboard. I'm taking the cup out of the cupboard. I'm turning the coffee machine on. I'm putting milk in the coffee machine. Now the coffee is pouring. I'm holding the cup in my hands, feeling the warmth. I know it sounds funny, but it just helps you bring you in the present moment and be aware. And that's just one of the little exercises I have in my book. So I've got not just journaling exercises, I've got little prompt questions, little exercises that readers can do in their own life just by taking small little steps. And I've got space for them there as well to start their journey while they're reading the book. I think bringing awareness is one of the biggest thing for me. For me, the small things like slowing down in the morning, being present, something as simple as having a coffee without a distraction. So I am in alignment with myself instead of just rushing through chaos in my life makes a huge difference on how I live my life. So, and that's what I would give to my readers as well, that it's not just about journaling, it's not just about answering questions, but it's about trying to create a life which is fully yours. Do things that make you happy and try and identify those things and do more of those things.
You shared your personal story with your marriage and challenges and separation. And a lot of times in modern day relationships, it has become so strained, the role definitions changing, and people not able to find joy in relationships, and especially when one relationship doesn't work and then we move on to the next course in our life, we usually carry those broken pieces with us, also same brokenness to the next relationship, and then make the same mistakes. I'm trying to link that back to the promise of your book, how you said that happiness is not something we are looking outside but inside. So if someone has gone through a difficult relationship and or maybe finding it hard to anchor themselves in a relationship, is there anything you would like to say, or would there be something for people to find in your book?
Definitely, there are some very logical steps, and I'll give you an example of what I have in there. So I would say start by acknowledging the pain, for acknowledging what's happened to you, because sometimes people just ignore it. People just say try and be brave and completely ignore what's happened. So acknowledge what's happened. It's okay, it's happened to you. Call it for what it is. Call it, if it's abuse, call it abuse. Next step after that is forgiving yourself for sometimes staying too long or allowing something like that to happen to you or taking the wrong step in life. We blame ourselves a lot in these situations, that why did I stay for so long, or why did I let this person do this to me, or why did I choose this person? Forgive yourself for that. It is it's something that's made you who you are, and until you forgive yourself for that, you can't move forward. And then I would say forgive the other person as well, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace in your life and you deserve to let go of it. And then from there, start working on yourself. And that just helped me start my healing journey from that point onwards. It felt something that I'm just letting go of this weight from my heart.
And a lot of times, the journals that we write that can serve us this purpose,
Yeah.
then once they have done their job, we no longer need to keep them.
Yeah.
And in many cases, that's there for the moment, but probably not something to cherish. Like it's not a memory; it's just
Yeah.
some closing the chapter, looking back in the past. I would like to go back to the core idea of the book of finding happiness. And we touched upon this very briefly, but happiness is not success.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about decoupling them. Right? And then how people find joy that might work very differently to
Yeah.
people as well. Right? And one of the questions I often get from people is that we know we are repeating the same cycle, that we are stressed and then we are trying to dissolve that stress by whatever mechanism, be it binge watching or eating or anything else. And then we are not doing anything that would truly change and help me find that happiness. Isn't we are searching for happiness in the wrong places. And
Yeah.
since this is the core of your book, I would love to hear from you as how do we understand our happiness? How do we find or define our happiness and then set ourselves on the right path?
I think happiness is something you don't find. It's something you cultivate, something you create by your daily actions, by your micro habits that you have every day, by how you stand up for yourself, how you create boundaries around relationships for yourself. In other words, it's your entire life, how you live it, and how it aligns with who you are as a person. And in my book, that's why I talk about every area of life. I talk about how do you define happiness. For me, I used to think it's connected to my job, my career, my success. But when I had all that, I just didn't feel it. And that's where I started my journey. And I feel there will be a lot of people who would be like, yeah, I've got everything, I've ticked all the boxes, but I just still feel something's off. I feel disconnected from myself. And I think it starts with that questioning, and then you look deeper within yourself in what actually brings you joy. And it's not, joy is not like big. It's not like, I define pleasure versus fulfillment as well in the book, where it's pleasure is like you go in and you have a good meal, exquisite meal, or you win an award and you get like a dopamine hit for a second and it goes away. But fulfillment is where you actually feel you're aligned in your life, you're living in alignment, and that's what brings in more sustainable and true happiness.
Then we talked about journaling, how to be authentic, and how to use the prompts. And you've given some wonderful ideas for anyone to explore. You talked about taking small steps that gives us joy and then build our own definition of happiness. In terms of if there is something that you would like to say to the listeners that we haven't covered so far, what would that be?
I want people to realize they're not broken if they feel disconnected, because I know I felt like that at times, that I'm not normal, I'm broken. Maybe they've just been chasing the wrong version of happiness or someone else's version of happiness, and they really don't need permission to create their own. It's knowing that you can find your own version of happiness that might be completely different from someone else's version. And I think the small exercises, reflections, and micro habits in the book simple things that people can actually do in their daily life to reconnect with themselves would really help the readers to understand who they are and bring their awareness in their own life. I think if the book can even help a few people feeling that, wow, I'm not alone in this, I would feel it's a success for me.
That's very beautifully said, and I wish your book all the success. And
Thank you.
once again, take that opportunity to request our listeners today to please go check out the book from the book link if you have enjoyed this episode. If you think that we have talked about topics that are close to your heart or it can help someone who you know, then please pass this on and do support Stories in Stanza on any podcast platform of your choice. And this is now made to like top 100 podcasts in the mental health category in US charts. So thank you for anyone who is listening and given us their support so far. And thank you once again, Charu, for joining us and
Thank you for
sharing your
having me.
story.